For those of you who may not know me, I'm Ted Wollner, Chair of the Environmental Concerns Committee here at Kendal, and I want to give the warmest possible welcome to John Petersen and the students in his environmental studies class on communication skills. And I also want to emphasize that this is just one in a very long series of collaborations between Oberlin College and Kendal. And we are enormously grateful for this longstanding tradition, and John Petersen has been an absolutely invaluable agent in sustaining the tradition. So John, why don't you take it from there and introduce the project?
Yeah, well, it has been an enormous pleasure for me over these many years of working in Oberlin to have the Kendal community as a collaborative group to work with. And I think together we've gotten an awful lot of work done. And it's always exciting to engage with Kendal folks. We've given many presentations over the years and appreciate the opportunity, particularly for our students, to be able to share the work they've been doing with a group of people who is so engaged with the community and has such thoughtful feedback for us. I realize that this is not the ideal context for giving feedback, but what I would like to say to those of you who are with us directly on Zoom, this may be not possible through the TV communication, is we're going to go through a series of presentations today in which my student collaborators are going to talk about the projects they've been working on this semester. We're going to progress directly through those without questions, but leave time at the end for questions on anything anyone presented, questions and feedback. So we would greatly appreciate it. I don't know if you want to jot down notes when people present, but we're going to go through 5 separate presentations pretty quickly on the work students have done. And then we really would love to get questions and feedback and entertain those. So as some of you know, I teach a course in environmental communication that focuses on engaging students in a variety of different community-based projects in the context of advancing various components of environmental dashboard. We have a variety of community partners involved in this. And so you see a list here on this cover slide of the organizations we have been engaging with over the course of the semester. I think I don't actually have the advance, do I, Caleb? So I think I'll just, since I have an ask for control, I'll just ask you to go ahead and advance. I don't have that many slides. So the environmental dashboard, I think, as most of you know, I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but this is a community-centered communication technology that's really designed to connect the different characters, elements, organizations within a community that collectively engage in work to advance sustainability, all 3 dimensions of sustainability: the environmental dimension, the social dimension, and the economic dimension. Next, please. There are several different components to environmental dashboard. Citywide dashboard is the component that monitors and displays resource use through whole communities. Building dashboard monitors and displays electricity, water, gas use, resource use within individual buildings. Community voices is the component that combines images and text to celebrate and promote the good work that community members are already engaged in within communities. And then the community calendar is a tool that allows anyone to share information about what they're doing. As you will see in the presentations today, students in our class have focused on all of these components in a variety of different contexts. This information is obviously delivered to digital signs, which I'm proud to say Kendal has a digital sign. Many of you probably don't know that you can control the content on that sign with your cell phone. If you scan the little QR code that goes by on that screen, you then can control that that phone in your hand. So urge you to take advantage of that. Next slide, please. A big component of the work of several of our projects this semester is on developing stories. The image here is actually of one of our installations, not in Oberlin, but in Cleveland. This is an image of an exhibit we host within Great Lakes Science Center in downtown Cleveland. You can actually see the woman on the left there interacting with a touch controller. In that particular exhibit, there's a physical touch controller people can press, but it's pretty much the same in terms of how it controls the screens and allows you to look at different content. Several of our groups, as I mentioned, worked on developing what we call stories in various different contexts that you can control and access through that controller. So that's an important component of the work today. Well, I want to take as little time as possible, so let's advance to the next one. And here, right, there's the controller that you can use. One more advance, yes. So here are the 5 projects that we're going to learn more about today that cover work going on within the Oberlin community, within the Cleveland community, and within Oberlin College. And so without further ado, we're going to move on to our first group of presenters who've been doing some very exciting work collaborating with an inner city neighborhood in Cleveland, the Midtown neighborhood. Larissa, you are on. Oh, I thought I got rid of that.
Right. All right. Hello, good afternoon. Oh dear, it went too far. Is it gonna go back? Okay. Hello, good afternoon. We are the group working on the prototype environmental dashboard for the Cleveland Midtown community. My name is Larissa. My group members are Eli and Sydney. Our primary partner organization is Midtown Cleveland.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So we have the privilege of working with an organization called Midtown Cleveland Incorporated. Midtown is a region between University Circle and downtown Cleveland, and it kind of centers that area around Euclid Avenue. It currently has about 2,000 residents, but we expect that number to grow rapidly in the next few years, and around 18,000 people work there every day. So Midtown Cleveland Incorporated, that's the one with the capital T, is a community development corporation. They're working to build a neighborhood with a thriving, safe, interconnected community comprised of the people who already live there. They want to develop responsibly, strengthening the community that's already there rather than pricing them out. As Professor Petersen mentioned, we're taking advantage of the wonderful environmental dashboard software that already exists in Oberlin. And the first community partner where we intend to place a screen is Dave's Supermarket, which Midtown sees as kind of their most trafficked community hub and third place in the region.
Right, so challenges and opportunities associated with this project. As Eli mentioned, Midtown is a community development corporation, and their primary concern is developing a community in the Midtown area that is unified and economically viable. Midtown has conducted and compiled research, reports, interviews, and other resources on their website. And so their goal really is to share all the work that they've done and will continue to do in the area with residents. Lastly, we know that Environmental Dashboard has been an effective communication tool in Oberlin. It has helped foster community feelings and encourage pro-environmental sentiments. We can really learn from the core concepts that Oberlin has experimented with and apply these to Midtown screens.
So going off of that knowledge that the environmental dashboard is effective in communicating pro-environmental and pro-community ideas in Oberlin, we want to be able to take some of those same concepts and strategies that the Oberlin environmental dashboard uses and create digital signage for the Midtown community. One of our approaches has been to turn to Oberlin slides to learn visual design and content themes that we know work and make nice slides. For the Midtown Environmental Dashboard, we've also decided to use resources that are on Midtown's website, as Larissa briefly mentioned. There are mainly 3 parts we've been using: Faces, Job Board, and Action Cards. The Faces content is interviews with community members about their work around the community. We were able to view these interviews and extract quotes to then display on Community Voices slides, which Professor Petersen talked briefly about. They are slides that display thoughts and actions of community members to empower more positive action. And our hope is that with these community voices slides, Midtown residents will see their own neighbors showcased on the environmental dashboard and learn pro-environmental attitudes from them. Midtown's job board posts job opportunities and a lot of local employment positions. We wanted to create a template for job ads that can be shown on the environmental dashboard so residents can learn about local employment opportunities and hopefully boost the local economy. Finally, action cards are a group of specific actions and strategies that Midtown has put together, including programs initiated by the organization and steps that community members themselves can take. There are 99 of these, and there are always more being added. You can see one on the right side of the screen right now. And we wanted to be able to turn these action cards into a format that can be displayed on digital signage and convey to Midtown residents how the organization aids in community development.
Right, so what have we accomplished thus far? Well, we've created more than 40 plus CV slides using the interviews that Midtown has conducted with community members. Those interviews are on their website in a section known as Faces, as Sydney mentioned. We pulled quotes from the interview excerpts and photos from the Midtown website to create those CV slides. We also organized all the aforementioned action cards into CV slides. We decided that these action cards would be best displayed through the CV slide format and created new CV categories specifically catered to these action cards that are more similar to Oberlin's categories rather than to Great Lakes Science Center's or Metro Parks categories. These categories are Our Neighbors, Next Generation, Natural Midtown, which directly mirrors Oberlin's Our Neighbors, Next Generation, Natural Oberlin. And then we also created a prototype slide look for what each individual job posting will look like, as seen on the right here. These job listings will be integrated into the community calendar software that Oberlin currently uses. So it would be an easy way to for employers to upload job postings. And of course, Midtown will have its own community calendar, but it'll be using the same software as the Oberlin community calendar.
So Larissa just talked about all these community voices slides, which are kind of shuffled together one-off slides. And now we're going to talk about the story sequences we've developed, which Professor Petersen mentioned at the beginning. So our first is a story of Midtown sequence. Midtown Cleveland Incorporated has been in the area for over a decade, but we still want to make sure that residents really understand what they're doing there. So we've condensed those 99 action steps that we talked about earlier on into a summary of Midtown goals. And then we paired that with an explanation of what a community development corporation does to help Midtown residents understand exactly who Midtown Inc. is and what they stand for. We've also developed an introductory story to help people in Midtown understand what an environmental dashboard is and what it does. We know that even in Oberlin, where it's been implemented to great success for years, some residents still aren't completely clear on the details around its purpose and its function. And we want to hit the ground running in Midtown by helping the community understand exactly what we're doing there.
So this project doesn't stop here. Even as the semester closes and our coursework ends, there is still some content that needs to be finalized. Throughout this process, we've been very thoughtful about matching pictures to the words on the slide to make sure that they both convey the same message and enhance the value of the slide. So we're still working on getting some pictures. On the screen right now, you can see an example of a slide that does not yet have a matched picture. And instead, we've inserted an image description as a note for a future photo to be matched. One of our most immediate next steps is a program evaluation, and I'm actually going to be working on this during February. Our goal is to evaluate the effectiveness of the digital signage, and to do so, we first need to survey the baseline attitudes of Midtown residents towards environmental and community issues. Then, after the screens have been installed for a few months, we can reassess and see if they really did boost a pro-community and pro-environmental outlook. So I'm going to be working on taking these initial surveys and talking with Midtown residents in Dave's Market, where we hope the first screen is installed in a few months. And lastly, we are hoping that in the future, these Midtown environmental dashboard screens will pop up all over the neighborhood, not just in Dave's, but in other community hubs. The hope is that this environmental dashboard work will expand throughout the Midtown area in Cleveland. And some of our classmates have been working with the environmental dashboard in a different area of Cleveland at Great Lakes Science Center. And they're going to talk to us about that now.
So I'm Ian. These are my group members, Camille and Maya, and we've been working on redeveloping Great Lakes Science Center's physical dashboard display. So Great Lakes Science Center is Cleveland's premier science institution. As part of that, Oberlin and Environmental Dashboard have a exhibit inside that specifically focuses on teaching kids environmentalism and in how environmental dashboard works in connection with Great Lakes Science Center.
So like Ian said, there's currently an environmental dashboard exhibit in the Great Lakes Science Center. As of right now, it is situated next to the main atrium, so it's not directly in the flow of visitor traffic. So we created signage right outside of the exhibit to hopefully lure guests who are in the main atrium in. And Maya and I have been taking baseline data through video analysis since the spring to evaluate guest experiences. And I'll later go in later in the presentation about how we took this data. But through this video analysis in the spring, we noticed that children were not fully understanding the connection between the screen and the tablet controller. So in addition to the signage outside of the atrium, we decided to make signage inside the exhibit that would just reiterate this connection so they know how to properly use the exhibit.
Our goals are to, again, like Camille said, to entice people into the exhibit as they're walking by, to give kids a better sense of how environmental dashboard works, and to replace the poster that we have currently explaining all of this with something more visually interesting. Additionally, we want to measure the impact of the new signage on how people interact with the exhibit.
So some of the challenges that we were faced with were that guests, specifically children, were having trouble understanding what the exhibit's functions are and how to make the connection between the tablet and the dashboard, as Camille mentioned earlier. Additionally, the location of the exhibit is not ideal, given that it's tucked away in a corner of the museum, making it difficult for people walking by to see. Finally, the rate of interaction was just simply lower than we would have liked. And so by understanding and overcoming these challenges, there are various opportunities that this project also presents us with. First of all, having the exhibit's functions be presented more clearly will allow guests, especially the children, to have an easier time understanding how the environmental dashboard works and making the connection between this is what I'm doing on the tablet and this is what's being displayed on the screen. This improvement would create a more efficient learning environment for the viewers, because our main goal is that people leave this exhibit with a better understanding of the environment and their role they play in it than when they first arrived.
So like I said before, me and Maya have been taking video analysis since the spring. And this data includes things like who's interacting, how long they're interacting, and how they're interacting. So if they're interacting with it properly. So with this being said, let's say there's a family of 4 walking through the exhibit. Maya and I will watch this interaction through a camera that's actually been placed in the exhibit, and it tells us what areas of the exhibit they've moved into. So we'll see which part of the exhibit they looked at, for how long they looked at it, and if they interacted with the touchscreen, which is the most important part we want to look at, because we want to see if they're using this properly and actually getting what we want them to get out of this. So through this data analysis in the spring, me and Maya, actually, this is when we first noticed the disconnect between the exhibit and the guests fully understanding how the exhibit is supposed to be used. So after the new signage was put in, we used the same process of video analysis to see if we have reached our goals.
So we updated the text already on the poster to make it more readable, and then worked with our collaborators at Great Lakes Science Center and Maddie Faubert to get the text on the posters constructed and installed.
So while this project is not finished and it will continue to be improved over time, we were successful in creating and installing this new signage, which is a huge step in the right direction. After this, Camille and I took some more data post-installation. However, after taking the data from the following weekend, we realized that the week following the installation, there was an event taking place at the museum, which greatly reduced the number of visitors interacting with the exhibit. And you can kind of see there's tables set up in that image in the top right. So these results were not significant for this reason, which is unfortunate, but that's just life. And because of this, Camille and I selected 10 15-minute sections throughout the following weeks and had the most interaction and retook the data for analysis in order to have more accurate results. So because our first set of results was not significant, as I just explained, we're going to have Abby Morris analyze the new data that we took in order to determine whether or not there were changes in the amount and type of interaction since installing the new signage, and if that increased or decreased or how it changed. In addition, more data will be collected over time and analyzed in order to get a more accurate picture as to whether or not the signage has been affected.
So beyond taking more data, we're also trying to create a plan for other revisions to the exhibit. So this would include adding signage to the pillar in the exhibit that would entice viewers in, as well as integrating the stationary bicycle with the rest of the exhibit. While we've been working on this, the next group has been working on interacting with kids in a different way at the Oberlin Elementary School.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to be able to connect in this way. My name is Tessia, and my group members are Anna Silverman and Belle Smith. And today we're going to be sharing with you our project with the new Oberlin Elementary School throughout this past semester. We can go to the next slide. So the big ideas and the goal behind our project has been to develop stories for the environmental dashboard display in the lobby, which you can see a picture of in the top right corner of the new school, which is really one of a kind in its energy and water monitoring capabilities, and even has its own solar panels, which you can also see below. So as Professor Petersen described, stories are a series of slideshows with animated visuals, graphics, graphs, and accompanying text that help teach the lobby visitors about renewable energy, why water is important, and the new green technology in the school. And a central goal in all of these stories is for them to be specific to the students, to the school, and the community. And so in order to do this, we tried to incorporate examples and images and facts that relate to the school's resource use and its green technology in the city of Oberlin itself. And we approach this project in this way with the hope of helping passersby see how environmentally friendly behaviors and resource use directly affect their everyday lives, with the hope of making them be able to engage and feel like the content we were producing is relevant to their lives. So although the environmental dashboard has existed in various forms in previous Oberlin public schools, with the new level of monitoring in this building, we were presented with the exciting challenge of explaining all of the new and very complex features of this building and the environmental dashboard's new interactive aspects, which you saw kind of in a similar way at the Great Lakes Science Center, in a way that was going to be digestible and interesting to our audience, which for the majority is quite young. So ultimately, as is the overall goal of the dashboard, wherever it exists, we aim to promote systems thinking and a sense of ability and significance for the students as members of the Oberlin community and environment. So by tying back our stories to familiar places and routines and resources, we hope to help the students see connections between the information and data that they were seeing that might otherwise seem a little bit hard to digest. So before we dive further into the process of creating these stories and share one complete story with you, we just wanted to introduce the three main focuses of our stories. So each of the next slides include one snapshot of the story as it was in development. So this first one is, why is water important? And the next is energy use. And our third story is about renewable energy.
From creating our initial prototypes, as Tessia described, we had two major opportunities to get insights and receive feedback from our target audiences. First, we were able to take part in John Petersen's teacher workshop. He had planned to get the teachers excited and more informed about the new features of the environmental dashboard. As you can see on the photo on the left, John is presenting the goal of the updated dashboard to the teachers and school faculty. For Anna, Tessie, and I, this was actually our first time being at the new Oberlin Elementary School, so witnessing the actual display gave us a better idea off the bat on how we could improve the content we were creating. We were also able to see some of the new monitoring technologies in place as seen on the photo on the right. The second portion of this workshop was actually getting the teachers involved with the content and technologies. Here we were able to watch and take notes on their feedback and learn how to make it more effective for their usage and integrations into the classroom. And the second opportunity we got for feedback was our presentation to Brandy Hicks's 5th grade STEAM classroom. We felt so lucky that we were actually able to interact with our target audience of our work, so we came up with a 2-pronged approach to collecting feedback. Initially, we presented to the students one of our prototypes that Anna had been working on titled How Renewable Energy Will Power Our Future. And as the students watched, we had a worksheet for them to fill out so we could get a better idea on if the story's content was digestible. As it was our first physical outcome of our work, I couldn't help but include some of the inspiring answers from the 5th graders. So there's a picture of that on the left here. And if the handwriting is a little too tough to read, I have it printed on the right for you for your convenience. So I'll give everyone a little bit of a second to read through the inspiring answers. So the second prong of our approach was getting feedback from the students themselves on how to make the content better. As you can see from the pictures, we split the class up into 3 groups that Tessia, Anna, and I each proctored and asked the students discussion questions from a pre-curated list that we had created a while back. The students gave us so much helpful information to apply to our stories, especially on how to make our stories more eye-catching with brighter colors and Oberlin Elementary School tailored material, which you can kind of see the photos.
So now I'm going to show you what all of these steps led up to. The following slides are an excerpt from our renewable energy story that I was working on throughout the whole semester. The goal of the story is to teach the students about renewable energy while learning about the renewable energy used in their school and community. When the environmental dashboard is installed at Oberlin Elementary's lobby, this story would normally run automatically and silently through. But for the sake of this presentation, I will be occasionally pausing to talk about some of the intentions and logic behind the slides that we created. So here you see we have Flash the squirrel guiding through the story. He's a character that the kids are familiar and fond of from previous environmental dashboard displays at their old schools. We were having him tell the story to get the kids more engaged and interested by seeing a familiar figure. Also take notice of the color change between the first and the second slides to make the story more impactful for wider age ranges, including some that have yet to master reading. We use colors to implicitly represent good and bad things. Non-renewable energy had a dark and gloomy color scheme, while the introduction of renewable energy was paired with bright and cheery colors. Additionally, a note we got from many of the kids in the focus groups was that the slides should be more colorful, so we made sure to implement that in the stories we created. As you can see here, there's a note on the house that says, "Edit house graphic to look like Oberlin Elementary School." This will of course not be in the final product, but our team's primary goal this semester was to lay out the plans for the stories. There will be someone more familiar with graphic design for the environmental dashboard to make our ideas come to life in the final product. You'll see notes throughout the story that I'm presenting on what these future graphics should look like. When the story is installed in the environmental dashboard, this will be a graph that displays the real-time data of the solar panel's electricity production. This slide is meant to emphasize to the students how these solar panels are directly affecting the school and their lives. Connecting renewable energy to real-world examples makes information more meaningful and memorable for the students. So that's what a sample of our story looks like. Now I'm going to talk about some future steps that future groups will work on going forward. The first one is to create school-specific graphics and pictures. As I discussed earlier, we have written plans for future graphics to be designed. These graphics are going to be specific to the elementary school, such as Flash the squirrel over there, wearing a t-shirt that has the school mascot on it. We also want more photos to be taken of the school and include notable figures from Oberlin that the students recognize. The next one is to polish updated stories. It's always good to have a second eye, make edits, and shorten the stories so that they can communicate most efficiently. We also would like future groups to run focus groups again for the stories. Our 5th grade workshop was so useful in guiding our ideas and designs of these stories. We hope future groups will continue to meet with teachers and students and get their feedback on the updated stories. Finally, the end goal is to display the environmental dashboard in the lobby of the building, which you see pictured right on the bottom there. This will be able to show our stories to all of the building's residents. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Next, we're going to hear from another group who's also developing content for the environmental dashboard display, Courtney and Eric.
Sorry, give me a second here, folks. Trying to take over the screen. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. Courtney and I are happy to be able to share, if I can get the slides to move. Is that working? There we go. All right. So Courtney and I are happy to be able to share our team's progress on a content development project we've been working on for Oberlin's citywide dashboard. We've created a number of promotional slides intended to engage our community more in climate-focused initiatives in Oberlin. Recognizing the threat of climate change, various stakeholders in our community have spent many years actively involved in climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. Many of these are highlighted in the updated 2019 Climate Action Plan, which addresses Oberlin's strategy to mitigate climate change, and the Climate Vulnerability Assessment Report released this past summer to identify climate vulnerabilities and adaptation strategies. So our project has built on the efforts of previous students in this class to develop what we're calling climate action update slides. We've also been working to develop some community voices slides that highlight community members who are working to make Oberlin more resilient to the impact of climate change. Both of these content areas will ideally encourage people in Oberlin to think of themselves as belonging to a sustainable community with a shared narrative around climate action. We hope promoting this narrative and easy steps for community members to get involved will promote further climate action in Oberlin. Now, before we talk more about like the content that we actually created and the future of this project, Courtney is going to walk us through some of the specific initiatives highlighted in our climate action update slides.
Sure, as you just heard, Oberlin has been doing a lot of climate resilience planning and assessing, but to be completely honest with you, as someone who grew up in New York City, I didn't really know what Oberlin, this 8,000 person city 30 miles away from Cleveland, had in store for me coming to college, especially if I looked at a map like this one. However, after living here for a year and a half and learning more about the community around me, my mental map looks a little more like one you're about to see. It includes solar panels, it has electric cars, bike fix-it stations, we have community-supported agriculture, a resource-monitored elementary school with STEAM classes, Oberlin Community Services providing emergency services for residents, and many more projects. Now this is a city I'm excited to live in. But Unfortunately, many residents don't also know about these projects going on around us. They don't know that they could be getting back soil from food scraps they're composting, or earn up to $50 for installing a rain barrel. They could get a home energy rebate or a business electricity consultation. So, this semester, Eric and I have been working on slides for the environmental dashboard to show off all of these projects and let residents know how they can both benefit from and support these initiatives.
So our climate action update slides highlight specific initiatives in one of these 7 content areas, which are outlined in Oberlin's climate action plan. Those are water, land use, energy, food and agriculture, transportation, waste, and resilience. So in this example, we're showcasing the city's managed natural landscape ordinance. As you can see, we focus less on specifics and more on promoting engagement with the project. The slides only appear for a few seconds, so we want to make sure that we're highlighting the most important information for people to get involved. Our goal is really just to promote simple commitment to values of sustainability, and then follow that by how each project accomplishes those goals and encourage them to get involved. So the first speech bubble essentially asks whoever is looking at the slide if they care about ecosystem health and protecting the climate. If people internally answer yes to this relatively simple question, people are more likely to then commit to getting involved because of a psychological principle of consistency in thought and action. Whenever possible, these slides also feature direct benefits for community members in the second speech bubble.
Here's another example of a project promotion slide. This one's for the Rain Barrel Incentive Program. Currently, we do have about 12 projects that are being promoted, falling under the 7 categories you just heard. As you can see here, the format of these are all the same, but this slide and the slide you just saw, with this climate action update header at the top, so that residents looking at the dashboard around Oberlin, they're going to easily be able to recognize these slides as a project or initiative that's going on around them. We're also choosing photographs to further show the programs and all they have to offer. These photos are going to show off project leaders, goals they've accomplished, or other actions that demonstrate the hard work our neighbors are doing. As other groups before us have talked about the use of the characters, Wally and Flash, our slides have these 2 characters in conversation with each other, discussing the initiatives. The use of these characters not only makes the content easy to follow along with, as the text boxes pop up sequentially, but it also forced us, as creators, to make our descriptions as concise as possible and allow for the fact that viewers pass by the screen and often don't glance up for more than a few seconds. Lastly, these characters are symbols of the environmental dashboard, so a connection is immediately made that these animals are representing climate action in Oberlin, which allows viewers to connect these initiatives with their own community and environmental mitigation and adaptation.
So the second main product we were working on was a series of community voices slides. Drawing quotes from Oberlin's 2021 Climate Vulnerability Assessment Report, which expanded on the Climate Action Plan identifying by identifying Oberlin's vulnerabilities, these slides feature individuals who envision Oberlin as resilient to climate change. So pairing relevant quotes with photos, we hope to show that people in our community are thinking about these issues of adaptation really deeply and seriously. And our hope is that this will allow Oberlin residents to see themselves more as a part of a solution to climate change, as a part of that community that is really actively thinking about adaptation.
While all of these incredible things are already going on in Oberlin, the world is constantly changing and people are always having new ideas and ways we can improve the community around us and build climate resilience. We want to help make those ideas a reality by showing other projects that have succeeded, projects which may also have resources to help others start their own, and community voice slides that share thoughts of residents and their hopes for the future. But, as inspired to create as we all are, inspiration typically isn't the great obstacle. Practicality is. We think something's too hard, we don't know where to start, or we don't think we have the time or the resources. So, we want to try and minimize this obstacle by giving direct action steps and resources in all of our slides. Here's an example of a slide with one simple text box about how to get funding for a project. It is concrete information, makes the process seem easy, and it's aiming to talk to all residents, not just those with prior experience or knowledge.
The slides we have so far require a few more touches before they can be published. Most of what needs to be done at this point is insert relevant photographs into each slide. Once that's done, these will appear in groups of 5 that will be inserted directly into existing slideshows on the citywide dashboard. We currently have 22 content slides in total, but this will change as future collaborators on the environmental dashboard add content to the climate action update slides. Climate action in Oberlin continues to grow and change every year. There have been a number of changes to existing projects or even the creation of entirely new projects since previous collaborators were working on this content. As a result, we had to edit and add content to existing slides, and we anticipate that this will continue to be an iterative process in the future, requiring others to add or revise the content we have produced. This will ideally reflect the most current mitigation and adaptation strategies in Oberlin.
Finally, we just wanted to thank Professor Petersen, Caleb Stripes, and our Environmental Studies 354 class for providing insightful feedback and advice on the creation of our final product. I want to thank Linda Arbogast for meeting with us, informing us about projects around town. And of course, we want to thank the project leaders around Oberlin that shared with us what they're doing, let us take their photos, and are also just working to build climate resilience and community in Oberlin. We're excited to see the path this project takes in the future. We're going to pass it on to the next group now, who's going to talk about an initiative happening on our college campus that we didn't get to touch on in our project, but we're really excited to hear from them on all that they've accomplished. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. I just want to quickly echo what Courtney just said, and thank you all for taking this valuable time out of your day to hear us present our projects to you all. My name is Noah Aubie. My other project group members are Dylan Hamburger and Claire Obrachta, and we're the project group assigned to develop an engaging interactive display to educate as much of the Oberlin community as we can regarding the college's carbon neutrality efforts. At some point within the next couple of years, this display will ideally be placed in our very own Wilder Bowl, which you can now see here. Wilder Bowl is a very central location at Oberlin College. It's not really on the north or the south side, but at the same time, it's easily accessible to everyone on campus, not just to students or faculty either, but just as important to our community members who will ultimately be key in fully realizing these carbon neutrality efforts, which Dylan will get into right now. Take it away, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. So, as I'm sure many of you know, the college is currently in the process of transforming its energy system to become fully sustainable and carbon neutral by 2025. This is the reason for all the construction that's been going on around Oberlin since early last year, with workers replacing pipes and renovating dorms all around campus. So in our preliminary research for this project, we found that students, faculty, and community members lack an easy to understand, accessible way to learn in depth about the many projects happening around campus and about Oberlin's greater environmental goals and history. So this provides an opportunity for us to try and fill this gap in knowledge and create an accessible medium for people to learn about Oberlin's carbon neutrality efforts and for people to learn about the reasons for the construction that everyone sees around campus every day. So my group is creating a series of these educational stories, like many of the other groups. And like Noah said, these stories will be displayed at Wilder Bowl in Central Campus on a new environmental dashboard display, which is similar to all the other ones that I'm sure everyone has seen all around the city. So I'm gonna give it back to Noah to explain a little bit more about what these stories are and what they're gonna do.
Thanks, Dylan. So yeah, essentially we've developed story prototypes that address the following topics: Oberlin College's historic commitment to achieving carbon neutrality, the role of efficiency in meeting this commitment, the college's new heating and cooling system, the policy relevant to the carbon neutrality commitment, how green and carbon neutral Oberlin's electricity is, and finally, a story on our all new solar array. I know those icons just went really fast, but anyway, as you can see on the left, those are the icons that we have developed as temporary placeholders for symbols designating these stories. And ideally, the aforementioned interactive display will include all 6 of these stories and have buttons that you can press to switch between them. And as you can see on the right, we have also utilized Flash and Wally in our stories to better engage with our audience. So as you can probably imagine, most people walking past this display will not really stick around for all 100 or so slides that we've made. So we made sure to have information on each slide make as much sense as possible without any prior context, while also allowing each slide to fit within larger stories and the overall meta story that is the college's carbon neutral infrastructure commitment. So now we're going to show you some example slides from each of our stories, what purposes they will ideally serve, and again, how they will fit within their larger stories.
So yeah, the following 6 slides are each a sample of each of these main 6 stories. So yeah, we're just gonna explain a little bit about each of these stories. Our first story, which is carbon neutrality, is basically a review of Oberlin's commitments towards and progress towards carbon neutrality throughout its history. So as you can see in the sample slide, this display will start by defining and introducing the concept of carbon neutrality. And additional slides in the story will go on to discuss the importance of carbon neutrality in Oberlin and around the world, and also review the college's history and achievements over the years in its pursuit of carbon neutrality. So taking a look at all the commitments Oberlin has signed and how we're adhering to those commitments now.
Our second slide is about electricity in Oberlin and the role of the municipal plant in Oberlin, OMLPS. It goes into where Oberlin's electricity comes from, all the external sources outside of Oberlin with a focus on those that are carbon neutral. And it doesn't touch on the solar array because that's a separate story, but it goes over every single other aspect of Oberlin's electricity and how it's carbon neutral.
Yeah, and this third slide is, there it is a example slide from the policy story and discusses the early history of Oberlin College's commitment, some key distinctions between sustainability and resilience, mitigation and adaptation, the role of the Oberlin Office of Environmental Sustainability, as well as the Committee on Environmental Sustainability, and how they coordinate, how they've coordinated in the past on the 2015 Environmental Policy Implementation Plan, certain tracking and rating systems to STARS, Green Edge Fund, Earth House, Sustainable Living Communities, the role of our residential education office, as well as some green cleaning practices and products that Oberlin's facilities management department has been very imperative in dealing with. Oh, you're muted, Dylan.
Sorry. This next story is called Efficiency, and it basically explains how Oberlin College is working to become a more efficient and sustainable campus. It also, of course, is going to define efficiency and talk about the differences between efficient energy and renewable energy. But we also want to emphasize that Oberlin, that for Oberlin to become carbon neutral by 2025, it has to pursue both efficient energy and renewable energy. So that's going to be a big part of this story. It's going to talk about how exactly Oberlin is taking steps to become a more efficient campus through parts of the Sustainable Infrastructure Program, which is this greater construction project that we've been talking about. And yeah, next story.
So our fifth story focuses on the heating and cooling systems at Oberlin, which have just started having a major overhaul to make them more carbon neutral. So we're going to start with like the district energy system that's at Oberlin, which is the foundation for all of these changes. And then we're going to talk about this conversion from steam to hot water systems and the carbon neutrality impacts of that. And then finally, this story goes over the new ground source heat pumps, which will be installed on North Campus in the near future, which is also known as the geothermal system, which will be providing more carbon neutrality aspects to Oberlin's heating and cooling systems.
Finally, as Claire mentioned earlier, here is the solar array story, an example from it, an example slide from it. It's discussing the tracker array technology and how it's very good at generating electricity with its tracker array system. And this is just a part of the greater story in terms of this story will also be talking about the Spearpoint Energy contract we entered with the college entered with Spearpoint Energy, excuse me. Also the Environmental Sustainability Office's partnership with Evergreen Energy, who we had the pleasure of collaborating with on this project, as well as OMLPS's role and wind energy's role, as well as the solar challenges on campus. And yeah. So this is also something we'd like to further include in our project as we put on the finishing touches. We have here an example of a real-time data illustration from the Oberlin College, or not the Oberlin College, the Oberlin City Public Library. Here is an example of Flash reacting to the total energy use being above typical use. And next slide. We see that Flash is happier when, of course, the electricity use is down to 8.87 kilowatts. And this is a really good example of how real-time data can be integrated in our project. And as we move further into the future, we hope to make sure that we are all as a group consistent with each other in terms of our stories, making sure they're all in line with one another, as well as making sure that we follow the environmental dashboard style guide, as well as taking some notes from what the Environmental Sustainability Office has offered us. And also, we would like to hope that these prototypes really just guide further content creation, and will be revised in the future to really make sure that this installation is as effective as can be.
Yes, and then as we mentioned earlier, our hope for the future is that this will eventually be installed as an interactive display on Wilder Bowl that students can interact with and learn about carbon neutrality. And our hope is that, next slide, that this will extend far into the future, way past Oberlin's 2025 goal of carbon neutrality, so that students well into the future will know all about these amazing projects that Oberlin has done to make our campus as sustainable as possible. And that's all we have for you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'll take myself off mute, and before I turn things over to questions, I just want to say, as a teacher of environmental studies, I'm keenly aware of the many challenges that we face, as are our students. And I just want to say that presentations like those that we've just seen by these students in the class, the work they're doing really is what gives me hope that we're going to be able to solve these problems, because I think it makes so clear that for every problem we face, there's an opportunity to do something creative and to engage community in moving us forward. So I thank my students for giving me that hope, and turn things over to anyone who's in the audience who has any questions for this group.
Anyone who's tuning in via Zoom, of course, can type a question or a comment or an observation into the chat function using the chat icon in the middle of the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. I'd just like to open things up by congratulating all of you on the quality and clarity and elegance, really, of all, and the stylistic consistency of all of the slides. In terms of content, I'd also like to observe that, having listened to your classmates from 2 years ago make the same kind of presentation, I'm really very, very impressed by how much farther down the road this whole environmental dashboard project is. I was intrigued by every one of the presentations, and particularly by the ones on the elementary school, the Oberlin updates, and what's happening with the college. In the Oberlin updates, I know you were just showing examples. You couldn't show everything that's possible. I'm wondering if you have any material on, or plans for securing any material on, the sorts of incentives the City of Oberlin offers residents of Oberlin in terms of replacing, for example, gas-fired furnaces with air source heat pumps. The rebate the city offers is extraordinarily generous and cuts the cost of air source heat pumps, nearly in half. Another possibility would be actually showing a house and a homeowner in which this kind of conversion has been done, or a building downtown whose landlord has very substantially reduced emissions and increased energy efficiency. Are those sorts of plans already underway or in the pipeline?
I can talk for our project. We have slides on power and on efficiency smart in Oberlin. We don't have that exact kind of specific thing, but it's definitely a good idea. And I would love to think about it in the future.
Let's see, there is a comment in the chat thanking you all for your hard work and commenting on what a great resource it is for the community. Are there any plans underway for presentations or work with high school students?
This class did not focus. Is there someone who wanted to say something about that bell? Were you going to say something? Someone was going to say something. Go, Tessie, sorry.
All I was going to say was, with my limited knowledge, is that I think the environmental dashboard has existed within all of the different levels of the Oberlin public schools. So I know that there's a capacity for that. But our project was more because there were like these new features at the new elementary school within its construction. But in terms of things like Eco-Olympics, where the schools would have kind of competitions to see who could be most energy and water efficient, I know that those have been at least past initiatives. So there is the potential for more work with that, definitely.
I can also tell you from my experience tutoring in the high school this year, they are all very jealous of the new features of the elementary school. So I'm interested to see if there's some collaboration coming between the two schools.
I will say we did in the professional development workshop that these students participated in earlier, that this group participated in earlier in the semester. We had great participation from the high school, so they're definitely interested. We had all of the science teachers at the high school were present for that. So I think the idea is that although these green features are in the elementary school, that it's providing opportunities for all the schools. And as Tessia says, they are jealous because the high school is pretty shabby relative to that beautiful new elementary school.
Yeah, time to exploit that jealousy and go further with the high school students. There's a question from George Blomgren in the chat. Do you plan to show students the city-owned electric company, which has allowed the development of renewable energy credits and support of renewable energy? Just a tour of the facility and accompanied, of course, by an explanation of how things work. Has that been considered at all?
Within at least the content that we were creating for the schools, it's very initial right now because the environmental dashboard isn't even, like, the screen is there physically on the wall, but the content isn't cycling at all because there's not actually like a connection yet between us being able to get the data from the monitors into the graphs. So that definitely is something that we could, part of like our plan is to have a list of things to do for future groups that keep working on it. So there could definitely be a component that's making that connection, because part of what we really wanted to do is have there be relevant connections that students can take home to their families. So something like that is definitely part of our goals.
Thank you. A question from Shirley Taylor, who's interested in the standardized style you used for the graphic portion of the presentation. She wants to know if you had any help with the graphic design or if you came up with it yourselves.
I can answer this one. So I think there was a previous designer that made most of the graphics, and we were able to kind of work on previous stories created and copy and paste graphics that were already created so that there was a standardized style. But And that same person is going to be designing more things in the future that we are going to be contributing ideas towards, at least my group. And I'm pretty sure the other groups also would copy. There's like a huge number of different pictures and graphics available for us to choose from for all of our slide shows and environmental dashboard things. So we didn't really take part in designing any of them.
Well,
I will call out Maddie Faubert, who's actually here and listening to this presentation eagerly, because she's one of the designers who's worked on these stories before and will be very involved in carrying the school stuff forward. So Maddie is with us today. I don't know if you want to say something, Maddie, but she's here with us.
I'll just say hello and just well done to everyone. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll repeat again my appreciation for the elegance of the graphics, especially since as an architectural and cultural historian, I spent 35 years teaching classes, most of which were absolutely slide dependent. So I became very sensitive to what kinds of photos and what sorts of graphic arrangements would most usefully instructively grab the attention of students. I thought this was very well done. Other questions from anyone? From fellow students or?
I would like to know about your interaction with the Midtown group. How was it working with the greater community, a community outside of Oberlin? Were they receptive to your efforts, and how did they help you?
So unfortunately, we never really got, we had planned to visit Dave's Market and walk around Midtown sometime in November, and unfortunately that just never happened, and we never got to reschedule that sort of meeting, like in exploring the community kind of firsthand. And so most of our interactions were with just simply a few people working at the Midtown Inc. rather than with residents, which is unfortunate. And it's why it will be so important to get those survey assessments before and after we put up the screens, because we didn't get a chance to really directly communicate and engage with residents there.
But maybe you could talk a little bit about your engagement with the staff there, who some of whom themselves are deeply engaged in the community.
Yeah, I would actually love to just kind of jump in and add to Larissa's point that like it was really disappointing that we didn't quite get the opportunity to engage with the residents, but I felt like we had a really wonderful kind of dynamic back and forth with the organization, and it is a really, really like pairing work from two separate organizations and trying to create something that's cohesive and works for everyone was a really, really kind of fun challenge. And I think Midtown Cleveland Incorporated is a great organization, and they were super receptive to our feedback and gave us great feedback, and we had a really, really good back and forth. So we could not have done it without that.
Well, it's good to hear that there was such good reception on the part of the organizations you worked with. It struck me as an enormously ambitious undertaking. I mean, you're really talking about using the kind of tools you've demonstrated this afternoon to accelerate community organization and community formation. I mean, that's super difficult for people who actually live in community organizers who live in communities day after day and do the kind of work you've set out to do.
I'm also interested in, this obviously can go so many directions. How did you pick your teams and who was going to work on what? And yeah. How'd you get yourself going?
I'll start on that, but I'd be happy to have members of the class weigh in. The way the classes run, we have sort of ongoing projects, and at the start of the class, whoever is facilitating the class with me, and that's Caleb Stripes, who deserves some real credit. Caleb, give a wave. We sort of put together a set of possibilities and then sort of pitch those to the students as opportunities. And then students will express what they're most excited about working with, and we'll do our best to put students in groups that are focused on the thing that they're most interested in working on. And then, you know, it's an interesting experience because they're part of an ongoing project, but obviously we also want to give them a lot of opportunity for creativity within that. So there's a lot of back and forth, which I think is probably pretty valuable professional experience in the sense of them being able to exhibit creativity, but in the context of a project that is already in motion, already has direction. And I think that's, you know, there are challenges in that, but I think from a professional development standpoint, you know, that's one of the things I'm trying to create is a sort of environment in which students get that experience of being able to be creative, but in the confines of something that, you know, is ongoing and has a life beyond them too, because of course, everything they produce now is going to be valuable for people in the future in building on their work. But I don't, are there any students who want to sort of comment on that experience? I'd love it if you would.
I can comment on it. Oh, sorry, I'll go quick, Cam. I was just going to say that I came to this class without, I had taken an environmental science course at Oberlin, but it wasn't exactly the path I was following. I have an education concentration, and this course actually counts towards my education concentration portfolio, given that I worked in the group working with the elementary school. So I was able to fulfill education requirement through this, which was pretty cool. And I am passionate about the environment, so it was nice that I was able to mix both.
I know for Maya and I and Ian, we were redesigning the physical exhibit, and me and Maya have been working on this data since the spring. So we thought it would be a perfect idea to just keep continuing that. And Ian had also been working on the physical display previous to this class. So it was just like a perfect unit. And that's how we split the work up. Me and Maya did the data and Ian did the physical display.
If there are no other comments on how all of you got together in each of your teams, I'd like to say a couple of more things. One thing, I was really glad to see a landscape component in one of the presentations. It's an often overlooked aspect of carbon neutrality for institutions and municipalities. And I particularly like the reference to tall grass prairie gardens for homeowners. In that regard, just a super minor critique. If you make a reference to something like that, it helps, I think, to show prairie flowers blooming in somebody's front yard or backyard, as opposed to a nature preserve full of wildflowers. It's a hard sell, I think, at this point in time for homeowners accustomed to traditional golf course sorts of grass. But in any way, in any event, that's an easy thing to straighten out. Actually, I don't think I have any other comments or questions. Does anyone else? If not, then